So I know I'm a little late to this party, but I saw I Know What You Did Last Summer 2025, and after watching it, I kind of just had to talk about it, so here we are. I Know What You Did Last Summer is about a group of friends who are being terrorized by a stalker who knows about a gruesome incident from their past. And before we get any further into this video, I should warn you guys this is going to be a spoiler discussion, so if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want this, getting all up in your ears, do not watch this video until you've seen the movie. And with that out of the way, let's talk about it. Jumping right in, I was never the biggest fan of the original movie. I don't dislike it by any means, I actually quite enjoy it, but I acknowledge that there was something about it that always felt like it was right on the periphery. It just never lived up to what it was trying to be. And so going into this movie, I kind of hoped that that they justified bringing this back, like that they were going to try to do something new or inventive or smart or cool with it. And well, to truly understand how I feel about this movie, we kind of have to start at the beginning because right out of the gate, I kind of got a sense of how I was going to feel about this. So, the opening of the movie, we are at Danica and Teddy's, uh, I guess, Danica's bridal shower. Um, Pretty immediately, we are introduced to the main cast that we're going to be following throughout the movie. And I am not exaggerating when I say that some of the dialogue right out of the gate was some of the most ham-fisted, like over the top nonsense that I have ever seen. And with that in mind, I'm sure that you can infer from that point I wasn't the biggest fan of the characters attached to the words either. But it's not to say that everything that happens within the first few minutes of the movie is bad. From that party, they go kind of beat for beat with what the original did, like hanging out on the beach and getting to know these characters and stuff. And there was some charm to those scenes. But when you get to the inciting incident of this movie that sets everything in motion, oh boy. And before I get into how I feel like about how they handled the incident overall, I do want to give it its flowers. This time around, the accident was a lot more intense. And in 97, it kind of feels like the kids spend way too long with the body. Where in this, it's more of like okay, this happened, let's get out of here. With all of that said, um, this was completely avoidable. Where in 97, it doesn't, like, yeah, it was an avoidable accident. It was a terrible thing. And those kids were, doing something wrong and they did something wrong. But it felt a lot more grounded in reality, like, and likable. I think is like is a way to describe it. Kind of like it's not likable. It's not. It's a terrible thing that they did. But how do I word this? Teddy standing in the middle of traffic challenging cars to hit him is the dumbest thing that I have ever seen in a movie ever. Like, that's just bad decision making on the writer's part. You just made one of your main characters fundamentally unlikable. And I get that this is a horror movie and there's supposed to be some relishing in these characters getting killed off. That's not how you do that. There's no empathy, there's no ability to sympathize with these characters because they did this to themselves. This could have been avoided. And with all of that in mind, I guess now is as good a time as any to segue into some of the characters of the movie. This time around, we're following Ava, a maybe you can tell me anything about Ava because unless I miss something, they don't do a whole hell of a lot to really set the character up, other than to tell us at one point in her past she was dating Milo. We do know that Milo works in politics. That's about all we know about Milo. And he's a beta, which I don't know. It's 2025. I kind of thought that we were a little bit more self aware than this. The whole calling yourself a alpha is really, really lame. But I don't know. I guess they didn't get the memo. Speaking of alpha, what would a I Know What You Did Last Summer 2025 discussion be without talking about the character Teddy? Teddy is responsible for all of this. And I actually believe that the actor here did something really, really great. He took the worst script with the worst dialogue, plays the worst character, and he is still somehow more likable than the two leads of our movie. And then there's Danica. as a fan of Outer Banks, I was actually looking forward to Madeline Klein being in this movie. That was until I saw Madeline Klein in this movie. I do not believe that there is a syllable of dialogue in this that she has that I don't find excruciating. Um, from tone deaf jokes to just very vapid, over the top, character esque dialogue. That's not to say it's all bad because then we get to Stevie. And, this is a spoiler video, so Stevie is one of the killers. And I am happy to report that they underused the character so much that at points I kind of forgot she was even in this movie. Um, and then the scenes that she is in, she's she's just kind of in the background. Like they don't do much to really set any of these characters up. Like we become aware of the fact that her and Danica have become close friends since the incident the year prior. And that's kind of all we are given about any of these characters is just like little morsels. And I don't like if they had done anything with any single one of them to give them character, make them stand out, differentiate them from each other, because they don't even really do that. All of these characters feel like they exist within a vacuum. And some credit that I do actually want to give the movie, though, is the handling of the legacy characters to a point. To a point. Um, I don't think that there's anything particularly egregious about the way that they write Julie James in this or Ray Bronson. And I think it's great that we got the returning cast and everything to kind of, I don't, give us anything to attach ourselves to with this, because if they weren't in this, I sincerely believe that after we were introduced to Tyler, I probably would have turned it off. And you may have guessed by now, but I do have feelings on the character Tyler. I don't think, again, that she was anything particularly egregious, but due largely to her death scene, the movie spoils its own killer reveal. We're at the 43-minute mark when she dies. She has not been introduced to anybody in Ava's friend group other than Milo. And when she's about to be killed, she takes the killer's hood off and, utters one, "You." And that's fine. 90s horror used to love that trope. So I was kind of here for that for a minute. But then as I really dwelled on that and started to think about it, I started to realize she doesn't know anybody. So the only four people that it could be are either Julie James, which we know they're not going to do, Milo, who was very, very apparently cannified the second he walked into the screen, and Ava. And we know that she's not going to be the killer because she's a foot tall and the main character. So that leaves Ray. There are a couple other positives that I do have for the movie. Overall, I liked the way that the movie looks. I think visually this was, better than 97. So I guess they have that going for them, that the cinematography in 2025 beats, 30 years ago. And I did like some of like the needle drop moments. Like the music that they chose for the movie does very much so feel, related to what they did with the original movie. But overall, between the vapid characters, the very, very cringy dialogue, um, and just kind of misunderstanding what made the 1997 movie work, I wasn't a fan of this movie, and I'm a very easy person to please. You can look back in our catalog. I don't think we have any bad reviews up until this point. And another thing that I think that this movie doesn't really understand is, making these characters like rich. It doesn't give the movie any leg to stand on in a way. Like I think a lot of what made the kids so relatable in 1997 and kind of makes you root for them after they have done something so terrible is that you see their day-to-day lives and you see that their lives aren't necessarily handed to them on a silver platter. Helen Shivers, who is, like the pageant queen in the movie, goes home to a shithole. It's not like Danica walking into her, 20 something fiance's houses that are mansions. And I get that the gentrification of Southport is a narrative plot point of this whole thing, but I don't know. I feel like you could have had that without making it so that every single person in this movie was some polished, fancy, affluent. It doesn't feel like a fishing town anymore, so that takes away from why the killer would be a fishermen. And I get that it's still in its heart always going to be a fishing town, but you've taken that blue collar feel out of it, and so I don't know. There's just something about it that doesn't feel believable anymore. And I can look past a lot of really, really, really bad dialogue and some pretty poor character development and stuff if you land the plane in a way that is believable and serves a story in a way that I think moves the needle forward. But would you guess that's not what they did here? Instead of doing any of that, they take a legacy character who served as a red herring throughout the entire first movie and has to do a whole hell of a lot to clear his name, and then they make him a killer. Which is like ruined multiple times throughout the movie. And then not only is it ruined, but then there's weird bits of dialogue shared between Ray and Stevie, the two killers of the movie, that would imply that they don't know who the killer is. So, in setting any of that aside, it feels like a hodgepodge of an ending. None of it feels like it's really, really cohesive. It feels tacked together. Basically, you have two endings. You have one ending on the boat with Stevie, and it very much so feels like it's so that they can kind of highlight each killer a little bit more. And I've seen movies do that successfully, but that's if you have compelling characters. Um, so we have an ending where Stevie reveals herself, and ultimately she explains that the person driving the car that they caused the accident for was somebody that was important to her, and she wanted Danica and Ava to feel what she felt, which doesn't make any sense considering she had tried to kill both of them earlier in the movie. Um, but then we have Ray show up, and to anybody who has been paying attention to the movie at all, you've already kind of assumed that he's a killer. So you're kind of just like, oh, good, now her partner's here. But then we have a kind of false, ending a little bit where Ray turns on her and shoots her, and she falls off the boat and everything, and we're led to believe that she's dead. Um, but then the movie still, keeps being a movie, and so we are then pretty positive that what we were assuming was going to happen is exactly what happens. And we have this very, very drawn out anticlimactic final scene in Ray's bar with, you know, Ray and Ava, and then Julie James shows up, and the dialogue in the scene is just, it feels like it was written by somebody who doesn't know how people speak again. But then, Julie James shows up, and we get that iconic, what are we, or, what are you waiting for? And ah, it's the most ham-fisted thing that they could do with this movie is take the things that she said that were really popular in 97, put them in this movie. And so of course they were going to, but you kind of hope that they're better. Not this movie. And so then, this character that we were introduced to an hour ago is the person who kills a 30-year-old legacy character. And I get that Julie James and Ray Bronson were married at one point, and that might complicate her being the person to kill him, but they have made it as apparent as possible that they are not fans of one another in this movie. So it does not feel out of character. It doesn't feel like it would be something traumatizing. If anything, it feels like Julie James would have finally been besting him, but they took that away from her. So we have Ava kill Ray with his own harpoon, and basically from there we're segued to this kind of out of place feeling, tacked on ending that's supposed to be like a happy ending shared between Danica, who is still alive somehow, and Ava. And the dialogue in this scene might be some of the most like egregious in the entire movie. The little bit about all of this could have been avoided if men had just gone to therapy. One of your killers is a girl, like, and this was her idea. I mean, it was Ray's idea, but like it happened because of her. So that doesn't make much sense. And then to pile on top of that, the two characters that survived this, who just spent the last hour and a half watching their loved ones be brutally murdered, narrowly escaping death themselves, are laughing and making jokes about the fact that one of their killers is still alive. Oh boy. I've had some conversation with some friends, and a lot of people are telling me that maybe I'm being a little harsh on the movie. I guess that's possible. Maybe I'm just misinterpreting it or something, but as far as I've watched it twice, and both times I have walked away feeling exactly the same, which is regretful, dirty, and you know, mostly inconvenienced. So, with all of that in mind, I am going to give I Know What You Did Last Summer 2025 5 out of 10. And I think that's because I'm in a good mood today. Um, if you think I'm being a little too harsh on this one, please let me know down in the comments what you are seeing that I'm not. Thank you.